Roshini Vadehra. I'm the director of Vadehra Art Gallery. I'd like to thank the Kiranadar Museum of Art for providing this wonderful platform to discuss art and design.
Hi, I'm architect Ashiesh Shah, and I'm very excited to be part of KNMA's design and art conversations.
Hi Ashish, so I thought that we would start with our earliest memories of art and architecture. For me, most of my early memories of art are with Hussain, having grown up with my father's gallery starting in 1987. Hussain ended up spending a lot of time with the family at home on our summer vacations. He was kind of omnipresent. So my introduction to art really happened through him. And it was an interesting time because he was this kind of larger than life figure, and he introduced me to so much more than just the world of art, like everything to do with cinema, music. I learned so much from him at that time. What was your first memory of your encounter with art?
So Roshni, I'm the exact polar opposite of where you come from. I come from a family of doctors who are so distant from the world of art that it's literally, we didn't even have one artwork at home when I was young. So it's literally that distant. My first memory of art comes from the fact that, there's just now artists, and my really dear friend, and now at that point a teacher to me, mentor to me, was Sheetal Gatani, who used to live in my building on Marine Drive in Mumbai. And every summer vacations, my brother and me used to go to her on the 6th of the building. We used to stay on the lower floor to just learn art. And she was my first window into the world of art. And then she used to take us to Jahangir Art Gallery. At that time, there was just Jahangir, so it was not like the scene that's now. There were no contemporary galleries as such. So there were one, two. So we used to go for art walks, and she used to talk to us about art. And I think that's my first. I would say my first encounter with art, my first conversations with art were with her. Sadly, our education system back then was not that evolved to teach contemporary or modern art to young students, and we didn't have that kind of exposure that children today have, and I'm so glad they do. But we come from a different generation of Indians where art was not even secondary, it was not tertiary, it was really very distant from a normal middle class individual. So I think my encounter of art started from there. And then I think slowly as I started growing up, I started following works of Hussain, Raza, Gaitonde, Tayyab. These were my four favorite. And I used to go to galleries. I used to see if I could buy something. I have early works of drawings and sketches by these people, which I used to buy from my pocket money. And then when I came back from New York, I think my encounter with art was with the contemporary art scene. So it was, obviously I got the early works of Jitesh and Riaz and Bose, and that was the Bombay Boys, as they used to call themselves. That's what I started collecting. I remember my first encounter with you was buying Manu Sharma, Manu Parekh actually. Two Manu Parekhs from your website online. I bought it from you, and then we spoke on the phone. I clearly remember it, and I bought 2 small canvases of Manu Parekh from you from an art website that used to be there at that point. I don't even know if it exists anymore. So I think that was how I was in an ocean of the unknown. But I think slowly you start finding your bearings, and then you realize what your collection needs to grow towards.
So in fact, whether it's the Art Deco architecture in Bombay or the Baroque architecture influences in Delhi and Calcutta, I think we're surrounded by so much, and yet I don't think I personally acknowledged the beauty and the marvels of architecture. I actually happened to, my parents used to take me to all these wonderful museums all through my childhood. Of course, I complained non-stop at that time. But, when I went to the Guggenheim Bilbao, which was designed by Frank Gehry, and I was like, oh my God, and here's a building that itself was a work of art, right?
Yeah, it's an aha moment.
Yeah, exactly. And then, and I was obviously super young at that time. But immediately I kind of started noticing, every building before the art that I was going to encounter inside it. What brought you into the world of architecture?
It's so amazing that you say that, because I think there was this one holiday with my family. I grew up on Marine Drive in Mumbai, so Art Deco was part of where I grew up in. And my earliest memory of modern architecture is my mother's from Ahmedabad, so we used to go every summer to my mom's maternal house, and my mom's house, sorry. And that house was built in a modernistic style by Hasmukh Patel. It was Hasmukh Patel's first architectural piece. So that house still exists, and it's in this area called Meetha Kali, which is very, very central now. And so and the house is so amazing because it's all concrete and with just marble and very, very simple. If I'm not mistaken, it's some grey sandstone, and there were just these primary colors that were used to distinguish the personal and the impersonal and private areas of the house, and it was so architectural. And now memories come to me and say, oh my god, that was such a strong piece of architecture that I grew up in. But the moment the piece of architecture turned me into an architect in my head was Alhambra in Spain. When I went there, I just it from a box it opened into a world, so it just suddenly I started like seeing landscape, and I started seeing avenues and vistas and fenestrations and roofs and scale and light, and I was like, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to build, and one day I want to build in Alhambra. That's where it all started for me. You draw as a child and then you start drawing, right? There's always a difference where you say that, okay, now this breaks that the childlike drawing, which to a slightly more serious drawing. Although I must say the best drawings that are done are childlike, because you never want to lose that softness in your work and the sense of frigidity and the sense of just innocence in that drawing. But I think my drawing practice goes back 20 years, and it's somehow happened that I happened to discover some of my books that I used to draw in, and they were very strong meditational drawings, which I call the Axis Mundi drawings. And I think from there it all starts. And so my design practice starts from my drawing practice, and it all evolves from there, and that leads to pattern, that leads to geometry, that leads to form. And that's how from a 2D to 3D it moved. And I think my first piece that you own, and thank you for supporting us, was the Lingam bench. And I think that gave me a lot of confidence to say that, okay, now I need to move to a more formal practice, and I need to see how I can work with the crafts of India to be able to create a kind of an atelier or like a think tank. It's almost like a think tank, because it's constant negotiating with problems, trying to understand what is the aesthetic we belong to, trying to see how what is our design language, what makes a product be completely us and speaks our identity. So I think that's how it kind of moved forward. And I think I started becoming more playful in my architecture practice thanks to my product design practice. Because what happens is once you do anything for more than 10 years, I think there is a sense of, the two things that happen. One is the sense of you start thinking of yourself as someone who is accomplished. So you become very I want this wall curve, but there's no reason for it, just because you want it, And so that whole thing of understanding, you need to step out of your own practice and start looking at it from the outside, So that helped me. My product design atelier started physically, because we also open physical spaces, made me physically get out of my design office and start looking at my office and saying that, oh, you take things too lightly. You're just designing because it looks good, but you're not actually thinking beyond that, So I think that 10 years of complacency got a little bit of a shake, once you start something different. Really made me start thinking that this needs more exploration. So what we said is, we will not only work with craftsmen, but we'll challenge them. So, for example, if you're working with the Lingam bench, it took about a year and a half to make, because we got metal in it, because a shivling does not have metal components in it. It needs to be it needs to be joined with the old lime joinery. So researching even the joinery of old Indian architecture and bringing it into the objects was one of the perspectives. When it came to working with the Manipur craftsman Lompi, we changed the scale from 10 inch to now 30 inches by just changing the composition of material and changing the heat capacity. So those kind of engineering feats were very important for us, and we worked so closely with craftsmen, and that gave them a new lease of life.
Exactly. So in fact, what's amazing to me is that, while you're obviously, exploring the traditional craft and all of that, you're also actually marrying that with contemporary art that inspires you, right?
Yeah.
So your Instagram knows that you're taking inspiration from everyone from like S.H. Raza to Anish Kapoor to Olaf to Ai Weiwei, and you're actually marrying elements from their works of art into traditional craft. And
the most of the time what we do is we try and see the ethos of their practices and see what research they have done. So when, for example, when Olafur works, he does a lot of research about light and the reflection of light. So we use that practice to actually bring their research into our products. So it's not usually, for example, we've designed a light called Lucio 1 and 2, and that light is actually inspired by the science of Olafur's work, but it's actually the physical representation of Lucio Fontana's work. So how we marry that is, what we try to do in the atelier.
So, I think more and more we are seeing like blurred lines in art and architecture, right? You're seeing so many architects actually who are dabbling. I use the word dabble because sometimes it's a more serious engagement, and sometimes it's just almost like a flirtation in the contemporary art practice, where we're seeing, whether it is, I went to an exhibition, in fact, I think a year and a half ago, where a bunch of architects had come together to put up these installations at the gallery in Chhatarpur here, and then you have like Martin Kosla, who's very much kind of involved in the contemporary art practice, being represented by Nature Mod. Your products are being shown by different galleries. I know that I bought mine from Nature Mod as well.
The difference between art and architecture is just one word: just function, right? Like the thing that divides both these beautiful forms of art is function. But I think if you can have objects, and that's why I don't call our products as products, we call them objects, is because even if you look at Anish Kapoor's work, he calls them dysfunctional functional objects. He works with the whole idea of object below the surface of the ground and the object above you. So all those philosophies actually excite me. When I read all of that, that gives me a lot of actually, what I can say is confidence. And I want to define a couch as a couch. I would want to see it's a piece of art that you can actually even sit on. So that would be interesting, right? Because then you live your life as a performance. Living in a home, you have objects that can be used to eat upon, can be used to sit on, can be used to sleep upon. Why should we define them? So definitions are what we have given it to make make lives easy. But I think somewhere down the line, some of us need to blur those boundaries to make things just aesthetically pleasing, but at the same time have a little bit of function in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, in fact, collaborations, between artists and architects have been also happening for a long time. Like the Ahmedabad Gufa that
finest
did together, and which my father was also a part of that project. That was amazing. And of course, though she continues to kind of foray into the contemporary art world, he recently did something with Anita Singh, and his drawings are now coming up very much part of the contemporary.
We've collected, both of us have collected actually.
Yeah.
His drawings. My atelier has about 3 or 4 of his drawings.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I feel like we need to actually see so much more of that happening. And in fact, I'd like to at this point also acknowledge the role of the Kiranadar Museum, right? They did this amazing exhibition of Mahindra Raj, the engineer who worked on some of India's finest.
I remember that. incredible. And they actually got the samples and the maquettes and put them up there. I spent like half a day in that show. It was exquisite.
It's so fantastic, and one needs to see more and more of that to actually understand how closely art and architecture are linked. And now, of course, we have Doshi's exhibition that's traveling all around the world from Vienna to Chicago, and and I mean that's putting us kind of on the map of the international contemporary art world in a different way.
But I think what my role is mainly to kind of integrate art. I don't like to say place art, I like to integrate it. So if I'm finding a corner or a wall in a space slightly as I would say, as exciting, slightly a great opportunity, for me to kind of say, hey, let's make this even more substantial, let's make this a conversation. That's where I think of art. I'm like, okay, and not necessarily if there's a couch and there's a wall empty, I would put art on it. No, I think it'd be nicer to just put something by the side or something across it, because when you sit on the couch, you're actually not seeing the art about you, so it'd be nice to put it across you. But so I think those conversations are great to have with your client. Sometimes we get inspired by an artwork that they bought or we made them buy, and we design around it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what comes first? Does art always come
later? Chicken and the egg. No, but see, 90% of the time, it's always a space and the art comes later, because, very rarely do you have a client who's so engaged with you that they say, okay, let's buy a piece of art and build around it. I'm certainly not a trained curator or a studied, educated, I've not studied curation, but I think having seen and experienced so much, I think I have a sense of what works with what, so I would know, for example, if the client has a modern artwork from a modern period, I can bridge that gap to the contemporary work that kind of has a string attached to it. I would do that immediately, because I think that would really build conversation within the room. But I think it's a case-to-case basis. I would say space-to-space basis, not even client-to-client. So sometimes you just happen to say to a client that, there's this very young artist that we've seen at the FICA list, or, I've just encountered at KNMA, or, wherever. And then you just say, oh, why don't we commission this young artist to do something? What art does, it's like a window. It really gives you a second layer into your house and gives you dimension and depth, where you can look at it and just feel like, okay, it's kind of meditative for me. And that's why when I said earlier, like, my collection is changing, because the more I spend time at home, the more I see the need to have art that really calms me or makes me feel still.